To Newswatch, let's go back to the theme of fighting for your freedom, particularly your freedom to speak your mind. And speaking of which, let's go to our hypocrite of the week. Labor's Melissa Park had to quit as a candidate at the last election after she made a speech calling Israel an apartheid state. And she doubled down on that attack at a speech to Palestinians.
It is not wrong to say the Israel lobby has excessive influence in the Australian political system. The Israeli government is implementing apartheid against the Palestinians.
Now, Melissa Park is now suing Liberal MP Dave Sharma as well as Jewish activist Colin Rubenstein for accusing her of anti-Semitism and of peddling conspiracy theories, both of which she denies. And she claims she's launched these defamation cases in order to defend freedom of speech, not attack it, defend it. Joining me is Jared Henderson, columnist for the Australian newspaper, head of the Sydney Institute, and author of the Media Watchdog blog, out every Friday. Jared, do you buy Melissa Park's claim that by suing people who use their free speech to criticise her, she's defending her own?
Well, not at all. We recognise that one of the great restrictions on free speech in Australia is our pretty harsh defamation laws. They're much harsher, for example, than in the United States. And a defamation writ like this from a politician or an immediate former politician to another politician and a commentator like Dr. Rubenstein is a damaging attack on free speech. Look, if, like Melissa Park, you go around talking about an Israel lobby in Australia, which means that essentially that there are Jews in Australia who have an allegiance to Israel beyond their allegiance to Australia, is the implication there, it's not surprising that someone's going to criticise you. Now, Dr. Rubenstein is of the Jewish faith, Dave Sharma is not. And so what happened was that two people criticised this comment, and Ms. Park simply, in my view, completely overreacted, because if you have a swing at someone the way Melissa Park did, it's pretty reasonable to expect that someone's going to come back and have a swing at you. It's called the political debate, which just seems to be forgotten in this instance.
Well, I think so too, and I think it's rather ironic that there she is complaining about the power of the Jewish lobby when she's talking at a meeting of a Muslim lobby. I mean, you know, is it just the question of which religion the lobby is that is bothering you? I don't know. Don't sue me too, Melissa Park. We're just having a debate here. Jared, we have hundreds of thousands of Australians who have lost their jobs. We've had millions who've had their pay cut. But to some ABC presenters, whose own jobs are safe, by the way, it seems that the most pressing issue in this crisis is exactly what time they should get a pay rise. I mean, here is ABC presenter Lisa Miller interviewing Communications Minister Paul Fletcher today.
Have you had any word from David Anderson, the ABC's boss, our boss, about your request that ABC staff delay or pause the 2% wage rise that was due in a few months?
Well, the Australian government is asking all government employees across the government to have a 6-month pay freeze. That means no pay increases during that 6-month period. This is a time when many Australians are out of work. Many Australians have had to take substantial reductions in their income, and it's appropriate that government employees should have a pay freeze.
Yeah, that was a good answer by Paul Fletcher, Jared, but that was a rotten question, I would have thought, from Lisa Miller. Why would you think that was a priority question in this crisis?
Well, I was watching the program I was watching the program this morning, and in one sense I was surprised, in another sense I wasn't surprised, because within the ABC everyone's sort of so concerned about one another and work with one another, and they're sort of so caught up with one another they can't really see much out of what's going on outside. Now, the idea that you would ask the Minister for Communications about a pay rise due in October of 2% being delayed for 6 months, as if this is some kind of matter of national news in the morning program, which was a pretty busy news day today, is extraordinary. And that's, unless, you know, you're interested in your mates, and I'm not really sure how many people are interested in whether Lee Sales gets a 2% pay rise in October. I mean, does anyone really care, or Tony Jones or someone like that? I don't really think they do. But I mean, it does show you the obsession of the ABC with itself. The ABC is constantly obsessed with itself, and the real issue at the moment is as you well know, and you've been covering on your programs, the massive job losses, which have hit particularly hard at lower income Australians and recent arrivals in Australia and less well-educated Australians. I mean, that's really the big story. The idea that people in secure jobs at the ABC, which haven't had any job cuts, although the private sector media has had many job cuts, the idea that we should be all concerned about that and that should sort of disturb us at breakfast is just a matter of self-regard. But it does speak volumes about how the ABC is obsessed about the ABC more than other media outlets are obsessed about their own media outlets, in my judgment.
But it also goes to me, tells me, here's the ABC using this massive state-funded power in order to advance its own interests. Usually it's ideological interests. Here it's a pay interest. Yeah. And when we come out of this virus crisis, heaven knows when that'll be, but we, I think, will have a big reshaping of the media landscape, because you've got the ABC, which has suffered nothing, nothing, in terms of power, jobs, pay, nothing, versus a private media sector, which is the only place where conservatives and libertarians can get a job. That will be grotesquely weakened. You mentioned all the job losses, etc. Titles folding. I wonder whether this disparity of power is something the government should really be looking at, because we're coming out state-funded media stronger relative to the private media.
Well, the ABC is going to be massively strong if the current trends develop, with so many commercial outlets shedding jobs of journalists and also closing down, but both in print and electronic media and also online media. We saw with BuzzFeed recently. So this is going to be devastating. And what you've now got is an ABC which is probably more in control of itself than ever before. I mean, the managing director has no authority, the chair has no authority, the board has no authority. Not that they're primarily responsible, but the managing director is, and he's presiding over. David Anderson's presiding over a conservative-free zone that doesn't have one conservative presenter for any prominent radio, television, or online position. And whilst people at the ABC say that they have, no one's ever been able to name one. I mean,
exactly.
I assemble all these little lists, and I'd be happy to run a list of ABC conservatives, or someone to put their hand up and say, I'm one, but they may be there, in which case they're hiding under the table somewhere, but no one is prominent there. And so what will happen the way we're going, that coming out of the pandemic, the ABC will be massively dominant, and it will be running ideological lines with no conservatives within the organisation and no one in management able to manage it, because it's become a staff collective. It's been a staff collective for almost 50 years, but never, I think, so much as it is now. And there's no one there capable of standing up that I can see in management to the staff collective. So it's not looking good. Now, it would be better if commercial media could come back, but I'm a bit pessimistic about that, although it might happen, you never know. And I can't see anyone within the ABC standing up to the problem, because everyone goes into denial by and large and denies that the problem exists. And so you have a constant left-wing ideology being preached, and you have virtually no other opinions, and other conservatives are simply barred from programs. They just, the way you silence a conservative in the ABC who's outside the organisation is you don't ask them on. And that's
honestly,
that's
we're addressing the various threats. We've got a fight for freedom in this country happening, I think. We need to. We've got this case of Peter Ridd, sacked for questioning global warming extremism. Yeah. You've got the Melissa Park thing, as you say, highlighting the problem with the defamation law, where you lawfare, you actually bury someone in legal bills, threatening them if they dare criticise you. We've got the ABC stifling debate. I think people have got to have a wake up as to what's happening in this country. I'm not saying it's going China way at all, but it is extremely difficult now to raise a different point of view. And speaking of that, let me finish with this. Alan Jones ends his brilliant career at 2GB this week. Now, 2GB is owned by the Nine Company, which also owns the Sydney Morning Herald. Now, that paper, which is of the left, said goodbye to Jones, who was not of the left, with a vicious and defamatory editorial, falsely claiming his encouragement of racism and sexual violence should be unacceptable to all sides of politics. Encourage racism, Jared. Encourage sexual violence. I know the paper later on changed that line, but how on earth could it have said something so false and so nasty?
Well, I'm a great admirer of Alan Jones. I've been a critic of his at times, but he's certainly a stunningly successful broadcaster. But just go to the 2 points. Racism. Anne and I invited Alan Jones in, I think, 2005 out to Villawood detention camp to show him what it was like in detention at that time. It was towards the end of the Howard government. He turned up. He saw scores of people. He took notes. Most of them were from the Middle East. Some were from Asia. Some were from Africa. He treated everyone with a great deal of courtesy. He took up some of these cases subsequently with the government, and some of these people he assisted. The idea that a man like that is a racist is just ludicrous. And for the Sydney Morning Herald to editorialise that without even knowing him really is just outrageous. And as for the idea that he incites violence against women, I mean, that is also a totally unprofessional comment, and rather a comment that lacks courage. I mean, I'm not sure that Lisa Davies, who obviously wrote that editorial, has ever had a discussion on air with Alan Jones. So what you do is you put a comment in an editorial, he objects, and you sort of say it wasn't there, and you sort of correct it. But I think those two attacks are grossly unprofessional and grossly unfair, but they demonstrate the kind of issue that you've been talking about, that the reason why people want to silence Alan Jones and people like him is because they know that Alan Jones appeals to a sort of person who is not grabbed up by the Sydney Morning Herald or the Melbourne Age or the ABC. And his great appeal was he could speak for people who had trouble speaking for themselves. That's why he was successful. And a lot of people at the ABC and the Sydney Morning Herald don't understand that because they don't know any of these people.
Well, see, I think that gives their venom an extra bite, because what has happened is Alan Jones speaks for the working Australian, whether you agree with all his views or not, speaks for them more clearly and with more success, obviously, and for so long, than do people of the left who presume to speak for the working class. And I think that's what makes him such a target for their hate. He speaks to people that they should be speaking to. Instead, they're speaking at them, speaking down at them. And I think they'll be celebrating that he's gone, but he won't be gone too far, because he's here at Sky for more days than he is now. So thank God for that. Jared Henderson, thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.